Hello, Gene Schwimmer here. Welcome to today's vlog. Today's subject is a subject that has suddenly, for reasons I don't understand, well, you know, on second thought, I do understand. It's because of the radical far leftward movement of the Democratic Party, which is a subject for another video, actually for several videos. I'll probably touch on this as time goes on. But because the Democratic Party has moved so far, and because of the growing influence, you could almost say dominance, of people like the Bronx barmaid, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and then you have Bernie Sanders, capitalism versus socialism. It's probably going to be a major, well, maybe not in the 2020 election, though it may be, but definitely in the primary, the Democratic primary. In fact, I think Biden, though he's ahead in the Democratic primary polls right now, I think he's going to have a problem in the debates, depending on how far he is going to go to embrace socialism, not to mention the Green Deal and all the other stuff that very liberal Democrats are trying to push on the party. What I want to get to are two things about socialism and capitalism. Number one is just these very terms, socialism and capitalism, because there's a kind of an apples and oranges mix-up that occurs that people are not seeming to notice, which, if I can digress for a second, is why I make these videos. Because I see things, I think, sometimes that other people don't see, and sometimes I see things that other people do see, but not till long after I see them. Socialism and capitalism, both of those terms come from Karl Marx. Now, the distinction that needs to be made that people don't understand, they think they're comparing, or they act as if they're comparing two systems, a system called capitalism, a system called socialism, but they are really not. Capitalism is not a system. As Margaret Thatcher once said, the facts of life are conservative. What she was getting at, what I'm getting at is, or stating explicitly, is that in the minds of most people, capitalism and socialism are systems man created. It's as if we were living without any kind of an economic system throughout all of man's history until somebody proposed a system called capitalism, and that's not what happened at all. Capitalism, and pay attention to this, all you liberals, since you believe in evolution, as I do, I suppose, at least for the evolution of species, you should have no problem understanding that capitalism is a phenomenon, not a system. It's a fact of human nature that has evolved. Nobody created capitalism. Socialism, however, is a system that Karl Marx envisioned in his mind. So if you're wondering why socialism never seems to work when its proponents try to put it into practice in the real world, it never seems to work, it's because socialism is an imagined system in Karl Marx's mind that he's trying to make work, that liberals want to make work because they think that would be the best system for mankind. The problem they keep running into is that their imagined or proposed system keeps running into reality, the reality of our human hardwired brains, which is for capitalism. Capitalism, as I explained in an earlier video, it's simply the effort of people to improve their own lives, as opposed to socialism, where you're supposed to ignore improving your life to better the condition, supposedly, of everybody collectively. Socialism requires people to give up the idea of private property, which makes no sense, because even under a socialist system, you're going to have possessions, and if somebody tries to take those possessions away from you, you're not going to take too kindly to that. Even if they say you have to take your possessions away for the common good. If you come home to find 20 strangers living in your house because somebody decided that for the collective good of the people, 20 strangers should be living in your house, you're not going to take too kindly to that. That's a fundamental flaw of socialism, which is why when a lot of people talk about socialism, they're not really talking about socialism. They're talking about, well, they're talking about free stuff is really what they're talking about. They're talking about a welfare state where a government provides all of the people's basic needs and even above their basic needs on the principle that everybody is entitled to have these things given to them if they're not able to earn them for themselves. What they don't understand is that people are not entitled. Does that mean that if somebody is poor, we should not help them? No, it doesn't mean that at all. We should, but it means that it's an act of charity when we do something like that. And when we do something like that, we should be thanked for it. The people who receive these benefits, that we sacrifice our personal happiness, our personal resources, our personal desire to improve our lives to help somebody else, they should thank us. They should not tell us that they're entitled to it, that they have a right to the fruits of our labor by right. They don't. Now, this brings us to the main difference that I said there were two things. So I just told you the first one, which was that capitalism is just life. It's just the way people operate. It's hardwired into our brains. Socialism is an imagined system that its proponents want to make work, and unfortunately, one of the ways, take as an example Obamacare, one of the ways they want to try to make socialism work is by cutting off all the alternatives. Now, my suggestion is get socialism to work in one small city or even part of a city, make it work there and use that as an example to try to expand it. But they don't want to do that. A common characteristic of all these liberal programs, from Social Security to Medicare to Obamacare, they're all compulsive. As Ronald Reagan said, if Social Security is so great, why can't it be voluntary? The answer is, if it were voluntary, most people wouldn't participate. In fact, there was a study done where a group of academics went back and they did a calculation. What they calculated was somebody starting his working life in the 70s, retiring today, how much would he get from Social Security compared to how much he would have gotten had he been able to invest all the money that he paid into Social Security. In every case except one, you would have done better to not have Social Security, to have just contributed your own salary into your own account. And this is the surprising part. Even a minimum wage worker would have done better with a private savings account, private government savings account, non-taxed account, in other words, is what I mean, would have done better than under Social Security. Surprising, isn't it? This brings us to my main point, a point that I haven't heard anybody else make. So I'm going to make it. That's why I'm here, and I'm glad you're here. You get to see this great point I'm going to make. What is the main difference between socialism and capitalism? I'll tell you the difference. You can state it in one word, and that word is timing. The main difference, when you really get down to it, between socialism and capitalism is timing. Here's what I mean. I'll explain with a real-world example. As I've said in the past, I'm a commercial real estate broker. As part of my job, I once had the opportunity to meet a vice president at Google at their big block-sized building in Manhattan, 111 8th Avenue. If you're interested, if you want to go visit. Good luck on trying to get in. The reason I got in was because Google was, and probably still is, looking for additional space, even though they have this big, and I mean big, block-size building in Manhattan. They've acquired additional space since then, and as I said, they may still be looking, because that's how much and how fast they are growing. And this brings us to my example, because when I went to Google to meet them there, you've probably seen photos, I'm sure you've read about this, but I walked in there and every floor has a completely equipped kitchen. You wouldn't believe it, a full kitchen. Now, you have to ask yourself, what if Google had instituted that policy from the beginning? What if, when it was just two guys working out of a college dorm or whatever they were working from, they had said right away when they got their first seed money, their first investors, well, we're going to create 24/7 kitchens for everybody where they can get all the food they want for free. I can tell you that if they would have done that, then Google would not be today what it is. The reason that they can provide all these amenities now, and I'm sure if you're talking about Obamacare, I have a feeling that the Google employees have fantastic health care. They probably have a great health care plan. I would say the same about a 401k plan. The point is, Google made a whole lot of money, and then they took a fraction of that money to provide all these amenities that I just described. There's no reason, if you're talking about Obamacare, there's no reason why the government cannot do the same thing. I could support universal free health care in principle. What I oppose is paying for it by borrowing and running up deficits. So I think we can understand each other. I actually could support a program of universal free health care. What I cannot support is paying for it with deficit spending and borrowing. Got that? I'm a conservative. I could support a program of free universal health care. What I oppose is paying for it by deficit spending and by borrowing. So let's see if we can think of an alternative way to accomplish the goal of free universal health care. There is a way. It's the Google way, which is to have so much money, which in the case of the government would be a large surplus and no deficit, no pile of debt. I think $12 trillion is probably above that by now. In fact, I'm sure I'm way low. I'll put the actual figure on the screen when I edit this video. Let the private sector grow. Let people make money. Enact economic policies that encourage growth so that we can have a surplus so large that we become like Google, where the federal government has such a large surplus and the rest of the country has such a large surplus that healthcare is just an afterthought. That just like Google, the cost of healthcare is, well, imagine if healthcare were 1% of the federal budget or 0.5% of the federal budget and we had no deficit and no debt. Then who could object to free universal healthcare? The problem is that we have people, liberals, that cannot wait. Well, number one, they oppose these policies because it means that somebody's going to get rich, and liberals just cannot have that. Unless they get rich, then it's okay, especially if it's from contracts with the government. Worst of all, if you're a liberal Democrat, it undermines the very foundation of today's Democratic Party, class warfare. So I would not hold my breath waiting for this to happen. But it does illustrate, as I said, the main difference between capitalism and socialism. Under capitalism, it's perfectly possible to have universal free health care. just as liberals want it. The only difference is, as I said, timing. You have to wait till you have the money to pay for it, and not just the money to pay for it, but much more, many times more than the money required to pay for it. The socialists, on the other hand, and our liberal democratic friends, they can't wait. They want to provide universal free health care and all their other programs now, today, before we can pay for it, which is the same as Google providing all the benefits they provide at the time when the company was getting started and did not have the money to grow the company and pay for these benefits. Had Google acted like the government does, where would Google be today? Would there even be a Google? Imagine if Google had done what the Democrats did with Obamacare, provided these kitchens and who knows what other amenities at the time that the company was first launched, when they could have used the money to invest in growing the company and getting it to grow to the point where these amenities are just an afterthought. Imagine if Google had done that, where would Google be today? Which prompts the question, what's going to happen to our government somewhere down the road as we try to pay for these programs after we instituted the programs, instead of doing what Google did, earn the money first and then use part of the money to provide these benefits while you use the bulk of the money to grow the company. I've gone long enough for today, so this is the end. Thumbs up if you like the video. Share the video with anybody you think would benefit from the video. If you have comments, put them in the comments below the video. If you want to suggest a topic for me to discuss, that would be great. Put that there. And one other favor I wouldn't mind asking, if you wouldn't mind listening, is if you really like this video and you have a Twitter account, paste the URL into a Twitter tweet, tweet it to all of your followers and ask them to retweet. That would be fantastic. And till next time, bye.